Resplendent dress.
Yes. We did.
And I did that on purpose because a suit was the standard uniform for any teacher until a few years ago when they all decided that teaching should look more like gym class than a formal educational setting. So, at any rate, I'm here to give the added semblance of dignity to this solemn occasion. The dress code. Teachers in the old days were expected to set an example for the young children. The parents demanded this. In fact, they didn't really have much of a private life, particularly in a small community, and they were watched very, very closely. So they had to dress properly and appropriately, and they had to behave appropriately. They really did have to set examples for the children. And when you look at all of these things that a teacher was expected to do in a strange community, factor in their ages. And you heard that Florence and Ruth were 18 and 19 when they started teaching. Well, if you graduated from high school at age 18, you took 1 year of normal school, and then you were sent out into the wilds to tame the hordes and bring them erudition and literacy. So this is, this is quite a challenge to a 19-year-old. When you look at our 19-year-olds today, would you want them in front of a classroom teaching your kids? No. So, it's an academic question, isn't it? Yeah. At any rate, this was one of the challenges of many young people, and of course you can understand why they got into a community. They would stay a year or two. Being so young, the pressures that were put upon them by the public were so extremely great that they usually didn't last more than 1 year or 2 years in a small one-room school. And we'll talk about the workload later, but they'll give you the details. We had, when you think about the Pemberton Valley, to put it into context, Pemberton was a pretty isolated community, and before the railroad, you had quite an interesting situation. People had to walk in here or coming up through the Harrison route on the boat, but it was a very, very difficult life. Even the simple fact of attracting a teacher to come up and teach maybe 8 or 10 or 12 children was almost an impossible chore. So most parents tried to school their children by themselves. And in fact, Margaret Foberg puts it in a book that most were able to achieve some level of literacy amongst their children. And the kids would learn to read and write, and then because they had a lot of time to practice reading in the wintertime, there's nothing else to do, they would become quite proficient at it. And when you see the sort of books that children used to read years ago, it's quite a bit different than what they're doing now. They read classics, and they had a good command of English and the fundamentals of philosophy and physics and science. I mean, it was universal, but it was all part of the age because they didn't have external influences to help them with this.